In this episode, we're going to take three ideas that can sound like administrative overhead, retention, access, and evidence integrity, and show why they are actually core to doing threat intelligence responsibly. Beginners often focus on collecting and analyzing data, and they treat governance as something that happens later, but governance is what makes your analysis possible over time and what keeps your conclusions defensible when someone asks how you know. Retention determines whether you can look back far enough to see patterns, validate timelines, and compare today's activity to last month's baseline. Access determines whether the right people can use the evidence without exposing sensitive data to the wrong people or creating unnecessary risk. Evidence integrity determines whether the dataset you relied on can be trusted to be complete and unaltered, which matters not only for investigations, but also for stakeholder confidence. When these three are managed well, intelligence work becomes calmer because fewer surprises show up at the worst moments. The goal here is to understand what each concept means, why it matters, how it works at a high level, and what beginner misunderstandings tend to cause avoidable failures. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Retention is easiest to understand as the answer to a simple question. How far back can you see? And is that far enough to answer the questions you are being asked? If you can only see a few days of logs, you may miss the early stages of a slow intrusion, and you may be unable to determine when activity started or how it evolved. If you can see months of relevant telemetry, you can build baselines, identify trends, and detect long-running patterns like repeated probing that never triggered an immediate alert. Retention is not just about keeping data forever. It is about keeping the right data long enough to be useful, because storing everything indefinitely can be costly and can also create privacy and risk concerns. A beginner mistake is thinking retention is only a compliance issue, but in intelligence work it is directly tied to analytic power. The more you can compare across time, the more you can separate normal variability from meaningful change. Retention is therefore part of how you create durable intelligence rather than only reacting to the present moment. A high-level retention mindset begins with connecting retention to the intelligence questions you expect to answer, because different questions require different time horizons. If your organization wants to detect slow-moving campaigns or long-term credential abuse, short retention windows will not support that goal. If your organization wants to understand seasonal trends, attack cycles, or recurring patterns, you need enough historical data to see repetition and deviation. Even for near-term operational questions, some history is necessary to understand what is typical for a system and what is unusual. Retention decisions should therefore be requirement-driven, meaning you retain evidence because it supports the decisions and investigations you care about. Beginners sometimes assume longer is always better, but longer without planning can produce data sprawl that is hard to manage and hard to protect. The goal is purposeful retention. Keep what matters for as long as it matters, and be able to explain why. Access governance is the second pillar, and it matters because threat intelligence often touches sensitive information, including user identities, internal system details, and sometimes data that reveals business operations. Access governance is the discipline of deciding who can see what, under what conditions, and for what purpose. The intelligence benefit is that well-governed access allows analysts to work efficiently without exposing data unnecessarily or creating opportunities for misuse. A beginner might assume the best approach is to give everyone full access so collaboration is easy, but full access creates risk and often creates confusion because people use data without context. A better approach is to align access with roles and responsibilities, ensuring that those who need evidence to perform investigations have it, while those who do not need certain details receive summaries or minimized views. This is not about secrecy. It is about controlling exposure and protecting both the organization and the people whose data is captured. When access is well designed, intelligence work becomes smoother because people can get what they need without constant ad hoc exceptions. Purpose is a key concept in access governance because it helps prevent misuse and helps maintain trust with stakeholders. Purpose means you access data to answer an intelligence requirement or to support an investigation, not simply because the data is available and interesting. When purpose is clear, it becomes easier to justify access decisions, to audit usage, and to explain why certain data was used to support a conclusion. Beginners sometimes treat access like a technical setting, but access is also an ethical and operational choice because evidence often includes personal or sensitive information. Purpose also helps you decide what level of detail is necessary because decision support often requires less detail than raw investigation work. For example, leadership might need an assessment of risk and impact without seeing the full set of user-level events. Analysts might need deeper evidence to validate a hypothesis. Aligning access to purpose reduces unnecessary exposure while still enabling effective intelligence work. Evidence integrity is the third pillar, and it is the one that turns data into trustworthy evidence that can support defensible conclusions. Integrity means the evidence has not been altered, the evidence is complete to the best of your knowledge, and the history of the evidence is traceable. Integrity does not require you to promise perfection, because systems can fail and logs can be missing, but it does require you to know what you have, what you do not have, and whether what you have can be trusted. Beginners sometimes assume integrity only matters in legal situations, but integrity matters anytime someone makes a decision based on your assessment. If a stakeholder asks why you believe an intrusion started on a certain date, you need to trust that the timeline evidence has not been tampered with or accidentally modified. If an investigation depends on certain records, those records need to be stable. Integrity also supports repeatability, meaning another analyst should be able to review the same evidence and reach a similar understanding. That is part of what makes intelligence professional. A useful way to understand evidence integrity is to think about the difference between working from a reliable book and working from a notebook that can be edited without leaving a trace. If the notebook can change, you can never be fully confident that you are reasoning from the same facts tomorrow that you used today. In security evidence, changes can happen accidentally through processing errors, system migrations, or retention policies that delete or overwrite records. Changes can also happen intentionally if someone has too much access or if an attacker attempts to cover tracks. Integrity governance, therefore, includes both protection against change and visibility into change, so you can detect it and account for it. This is where provenance matters, meaning you know where the evidence came from, when it was collected, and what transformations occurred. Provenance is not bureaucratic paperwork. It is the story of the evidence itself, and that story influences confidence. When you can explain provenance, you can defend your conclusions more calmly. Retention, access, and integrity are tightly connected, and beginners should see them as a single system rather than as separate administrative topics. Retention creates the historical evidence you need, but retention increases exposure risk if access is not controlled. Controlled access reduces risk, but if access is too restrictive without purpose-based design, analysts cannot do their work and intelligence quality drops. Integrity depends on both retention and access, because evidence that is retained but not protected can be altered, and evidence that is protected but not retained can disappear before it is useful. When these three are aligned, the intelligence process becomes more predictable and more defensible. You can answer questions that require history, you can collaborate without exposing sensitive data unnecessarily, and you can trust the evidence you use to build assessments. This alignment is what makes intelligence programs mature, because maturity is not only about good analysis, it is also about dependable evidence handling. A common beginner pitfall is confusing governance with delay, because governance can be implemented in a heavy way that slows everything down. The goal is not to build gates that block work. The goal is to build guardrails that prevent avoidable failure. For retention, heavy governance might mean keeping everything forever without purpose, which creates cost and risk, while the better approach is purposeful retention aligned to requirements. For access, heavy governance might mean no one can get data without complex approval, which slows response, while the better approach is role-aligned access that enables fast work within clear boundaries. For integrity, heavy governance might mean manually tracking every detail in a way that is unrealistic, while the better approach is maintaining stable evidence handling processes and being transparent about limitations. Governance should make the work smoother by reducing uncertainty and surprise, not make it harder by adding unnecessary friction. When governance is designed for outcomes, it supports both speed and safety. Another important misunderstanding is thinking that governance is only for compliance, when it is actually a practical intelligence advantage. Retention allows long-range pattern detection, which can reveal slow threats and recurring weaknesses. Access governance prevents misuse and keeps intelligence work trusted, which makes stakeholders more willing to share context and act on findings. Integrity ensures that intelligence products can be defended, which increases confidence and reduces time wasted in debates about whether the evidence is real. These benefits are operational, not just regulatory, and they directly influence whether intelligence work produces decisions that stick. On the exam, you may see questions that hint at these governance choices by asking what to do when evidence is missing, what to prioritize when investigating, or how to handle sensitive information. The best answers often reflect a governance-aware mindset, where you protect evidence, respect purpose, and plan for historical visibility. Governance shows up as good judgment. To close, governing retention, access, and evidence integrity is about building an environment where intelligence can be produced reliably, responsibly, and defensibly over time. Retention ensures you can see far enough back to build baselines, validate timelines, and detect long-running patterns. But retention must be purposeful to avoid unnecessary risk. Access governance ensures the right people can use evidence to answer requirements without exposing sensitive data beyond what is needed, and purpose-based access builds trust and reduces misuse. Evidence integrity ensures that what you rely on remains stable, traceable, and trustworthy, which protects your conclusions and supports confident decision-making. When these three pillars work together, intelligence becomes less fragile and less reactive because you have the history, the controls, and the trustworthiness needed to act calmly. This is not administrative fluff. It is the foundation that makes intelligence credible, actionable, and resilient when it is questioned, which is exactly when high-stakes decisions depend on it.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.